Hello and welcome to Practical Intuition with Kay, um, the show where we are always working to help you do what you choose, what you really, really want, and not automatically default to what somebody else told you you ought to be doing. And I'm Kay, and I'm really, really glad you're here. This is a special one, and I think maybe that's why I started off in a little bit of a place of like emotion because this, first of all, it's episode 400 of the show, which 400, I mean, I don't know, there's something about round numbers, isn't there? And like, wow. So, so episode 400 of the show, first of all, and looking back on all of that joyful time and all of that learning. And so appreciative of you for being here today. For however long you've listened. I know some of you have been listening since like the very beginning. And I'm grateful to you for witnessing me on that journey and for being in this space with me because I really do see it as a like a genuine, awesome, magical, timeless, created space. And when somebody chooses to be in this space with me and listen and be here, that really, really means a lot. So episode 400, that's insane. Really cool. And then the other thing is, this is a special one because I am finally feeling like I have integrated the learning from my coast to coast path walk, from my hike across northern England, which I did in May. I started on, well, I flew on May the 1st and I flew home on May the 23rd. And basically every day between there, I hiked. And so I wanted to bring you in on that journey, on what I've learned about myself, on um, just how it was, and you know, what I learned, basically. So I am psyched, and I am on. I like this too. I think this is a very good thing because I do have a tendency to go on a little bit, right? I'm on a tight timeline today. I've got a little less from now than 30 minutes. Um, in order to to continue doing what I'm doing today. And so I just want to I don't know, I'm pretty glad about that because to me that means I can make this. I like having a little bit of a boundary, I guess is what I'll say. And I'm glad to be here with you. So the other thing, that the last thing I wanted to share sort of as we're getting started is I am recording this in Zoom and I'm going to post it on my YouTube channel, which at this moment I think is called Adventuring with Kay, but it does change because like um, I keep changing. Maybe that's why. And I'm excited because I've learned how to use Zoom backgrounds. So right now the background is in the video is of a picture that I took on the coast to coast path with these beautiful, beautiful blooming flowers and a sign that says coast to coast path, like with an arrow. Um, this was one of the very few times when the coast to coast path was marked in any way. It was really, really interesting because there were almost no way markers, especially at the beginning of the trail, which maybe it's all confusing, but in the Lake District, especially, it was like really, really confusing about sometimes about where to go. England, this is such the reason that the coast to coast path can exist in this way is because England is crisscrossed with hundreds, if not thousands, of public right of way footpaths. And this is something that we certainly don't have in the United States. I don't know what other countries have it, but it doesn't matter how who you are or like what the circumstances are of the land you own. In England you cannot stop people from going on a public right of way that happens to cross your property. And when Alfred Wainwright, the guy who created the coast to coast path, did it, what he this was in the 60s, he didn't make a path from start to finish, like hew it out of the ground or whatever. Instead, what he did was he looked at all the footpaths in that area, in the Lakes District, in the Yorkshire Dales, and in the North York Moors, because that was the areas, those were the areas that he really felt like encompassed a lot of the beauty of England and a lot of the kind of reasons why, uh, to celebrate England. And what he did was he was like, oh, I'll utilize this footpath, and then we'll move to that footpath, and then we'll go to this one. Sometimes we were on uh, like what I think of as rails to trails, and which is what they're called in the United States. But like disused railroad beds became paths, and sometimes you're on actual roads, like really, really rural roads where there's almost no cars. Sometimes we were on a little bit busier roads, and and when I say we, I did meet companions. I crossed this by myself, and I met some really wonderful friends along the way. And so I got to have my solitude time, which I discovered one of the things I learned was how very much solitude I need. I never knew that before. Um, I I I really work to get that solitude even today. I basically never stopped walking, like ever since I've been home, which is now the last couple months. I take a good physical, walk, like a good strong walk. Sometimes there's running involved because I found a place near me that has these incredible sand pits with these huge, it's like a gigantic desert in the town that I live in. I mean, not gigantic by like, other people's standards, but in the town where I live, which is basically all trees, to have a place where you can just go and run up and down sand dunes is pretty cool. Um, yeah, and like learning that A, the solitude, B, the physical strength that I have, um, and not just have, but really feel motivated and excited to be in that space like every day. That is self-care for me now, which I don't know. Starting on this journey, I would not have said that that would be self-care. So um, there are so many things I want to tell you about, and I think I'll go back right away to the very first. The reason for doing this was because I was invited to think on. Well, I was asked a question. I was really caught up at the time in the idea that I had just discovered that I had a fatty liver. I was feeling really unhealthy and beating myself up about. I was caught in that vicious cycle that we sometimes get into where I would be punishing myself about, for example, the fatty liver, and I would be feeling terrible about myself, and sort of initiate a comfort food run. So I would try to comfort myself with some of my favorite foods, which typically are things like Nutella or donuts is what they were at the time. And I was really not sure how to get out of this cycle. And I was asked the question, how do you want to feel in a year? And the response to that question, I said, I don't even know how to answer that right now. Like, wow, let me just put it in my heart and think on it. And what came up for me when I did that was I want to feel fit and ready to walk this particular path, the coast to coast path. Um, because in the middle of it is the Yorkshire Dales. The Yorkshire Dales are where James Herriot, an author, a large animal veterinarian, just a beloved spirit, lived and worked and wrote about his time. So one of the books that he wrote was called All Creatures Great and Small. And there have been TV shows and movies and things made about James Herriot's life. And when I was about 10 years old, I got to read. I started reading All Creatures Great. I started with All Creatures Great and Small, and I just read and reread that book. I've read so many of his other works now. And to be able to be in the place where James Herriot lived and worked, like for me, that was such a dream. And I, that was really what it motivated me to want to do this. And then when I discovered that I well, like there was so that was the beginning of of the learning, right? Like, and then I started becoming the person who could do that walk. Maybe that's a really good way to say it. I was not the person who could do this walk when I first started training, but I grew into that person. And the learning went so much deeper than it started really with my relationship with food, my relationship with my body. And um, along the way, I learned not only that I could restructure that and that I could have a virtuous cycle, I could be friends with food, which is really what's happened. I could be friends with my body. I could love my body, which I really, really do. There was one day on the coast to coast path, which sometimes it's called a walk. I think of it really as a hike. It was quite a rigorous hike basically every day. So imagine, hiking somewhere between usually 8 and 12 miles. Sometimes it was 14. One day it was 15.8 miles. I had a almost 16-mile day, which I was elated about, of course. And it was joyful to do too. It wasn't just getting to the end of it. It was the fun of being in it was really great too. And there was one day early on where I was not feeling like a good wayfinder. Like I said before, there's almost no markings, especially in the Lake District for the coast to coast path. So it was really easy to get lost, even with maps, even with I was using Google Maps at the time and I had some paper maps, and even with a compass and those sorts of things, even knowing how to use them, it was really easy to get lost. And one day I was feeling lost. As it turns out, I wasn't lost, but I was really feeling lost. I was up high. Um, I learned to really, really love the up high places, which is where you spend most of your time on the path. But at that point, I wasn't loving it because I was feeling lost as heck. And so I decide, like, I was crying. I was really like, who will save me? You know what I mean? Like I was all alone up there feeling very not brave. And I thought, okay, what I can do here is I can get playful. And so the mantra that I came up with that day was, I'm an awesome wayfinder. And I started marching to it. Like I started walking to it. I started saying to myself, I am an awesome wayfinder. I am an awesome wayfinder. But then I also felt like adding in, because at that point, I think that was 3 or 4 days in, 4 or 5 days in, something like that. And I was discovering that my body could do amazing things. I started at less than 1 mile per hour. I had aches and pains every day. And at the beginning, I was really invited to sort of let go of all of the worries about that and instead focus on the things that I could do to make me feel better. So self-care, um, good nutrition, which looked very different on the coast to coast path than it looked at home, where at home I could have lots of fresh foods. I could have lots of high fiber, grains, and really have a lot of control over my food intake. While I was there, I couldn't have that because um, I didn't have it I could choose what I put in my mouth, of course, but I didn't have the same access to the foods that I generally have that I think of as healthy and stuff like that. So I was, um, when I'm staying in things like pubs and being invited to have like a full English breakfast, which is, oh my gosh, bacon, sausage, eggs, uh, mushrooms, tomatoes, fried potatoes, something called black pudding, which I really learned to love those things, but to have them in a way that worked for me. And in fact, I started saying, like, I do not want to upset the cook by not eating all of the food that is going to be placed in front of me. So can I please have like a mini English breakfast? And I would say, like, I really love the tomatoes. So I'd lean into the things that I knew had some fiber in them, some protein in the eggs. Um, and discovered that like there were lots of ways to get the nutrients that I needed. So for me, focusing on self-care, good self-care, a lot of stretching morning, a lot of stretching evening, a lot of exercises outside of what I did on the path. Meditation became a massive part of my self-care. And I did that early in the morning. I did it as I was going to sleep at night. Very often on the path, it was so meditative that I've learned to think of moving meditation as like a real thing for me. And good nutrition and good rest. And boy, I would get to the end of a day where I joyfully hiked for 12 miles, and that rest would be so welcome. But on this particular day, it wasn't. So there I was up in the wilds, proclaiming myself an awesome wayfinder when I didn't feel like that. And I started putting a second part to this mantra, and it was, I would say, I'm an awesome wayfinder. I have an awesome body. So learning that, learning that lesson, I have an awesome body. I can trust my body. It is, um, it is a body that like a long ago, as part of my training, I let go of the term scar tissue for myself. And I know that physically, like I have this tendon condition that I live with. I was in a wheelchair a dozen years ago. So I know that like that's a real thing for me. The words scar tissue really derailed me in my training. It really, really derailed me. So I started thinking like, okay, I'm sore. And instead of going to a place of like, you could get scar tissue if you don't dot, 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 I would think to myself, all right, I'm sore. So what can I do? And I learned a lot of great massage techniques and meditation, frankly, techniques that really helped physically as well as mentally. There was so much gratitude in every day on my trip. Every walk, just about every walk there would be joyful tears. I mean, and I brought up from my easel downstairs, I brought up a painting, a pastel painting that I made recently of a really special place on the coast to coast path. Actually, it was just off the coast to coast path because I wanted to find these even before I left. I think many of you listeners might remember that I have a thing about rocks. I really, really love rocks. And I, especially things like standing stones that human beings thousands of years ago placed these stones in this place. And I've never been able to see a ring of standing stones before this trip. And so there was a day that I knew that there was a group of standing stones, a circle of standing stones. And so I varied my route a little bit so that um, I could find those standing stones and just see what it was like to be with a group of standing stones that were ancient like that, and that human beings had touched and moved and placed so long ago. And I that day, it was just outside of this place called Orden, UK. So I varied my route off the path a little bit so that I could kind of walk past these stones. And I'm walking and I'm walking and I'm not finding them. And I was like, I don't understand. They should be right here. And there was this ruined bunch of it was a ruined domicile or building of some sort, and all that was left was a doorway. So it was a bunch of stones and a doorway. And I remember saying to myself, well, I don't even know why I had this thought, but I thought I will go and stand in this doorway and see what I can see. And so I go and stand in the doorway, and I'm looking in the direction that I'd been walking, and all I could see were sheep. I was like, okay, those sheep are still sheep. They're not standing stones. Like, this is definitely not, you know, I don't understand what's going on here. And I was feeling frustrated, and I decided to turn around and go back the way that I came, and maybe I retrace my steps or whatever. So while I'm standing in this doorway that was just a ruin with a doorway in it, I turned around, and behind me, this ring of standing stones spread out, and I just was gobsmacked. I just remember this feeling of such joyful, like, what are we doing here? In fact, it had been raining. And as I was standing there looking at these stones with like just tears pouring down my face, happy tears, with the thought, I think this is why I was actually brought to England, was to see these stones. The sky cleared in such a way that it reflected the circle of standing stones in the sky. Like that was a patch of blue sky that appeared, was just above the stones. And I just thought, wow. And I stood there feeling like this was the pilgrimage that I was meant to come on. And this was where I landed. And oh my gosh. And so a little later that day, as I was continuing to walk, I was in the Yorkshire Dales. So I'd crossed into the Yorkshire Dales, which that was in the middle of the walk. And later, my partner, husband of the year, Ben, would say, this is the dream. Like you're really there. And that was the feeling that I had when I was walking by myself that day. And I thought for a while I'd been thinking on like, I'd been curious about what my truth was, about knowing what my truth was. And I wondered, you know what I mean? Like I didn't know what my truth was. And I thought, if I'm going to ask the universe, what is my truth? I want to do it in the right energy. And I remember thinking, well, as I was walking just with this archway in my heart and these standing stones in my heart, I thought if there was ever a day to ask the universe, what is my truth? This is that day. And I asked, I just opened up that little question mark space inside myself and I said, what is my truth? And the response that came back to me still just fills me with such a feeling of love. What came back to me was that I'm unconditionally loved and that I am always forgiven. And look at that. I can even talk about it now without crying, without getting so emotional that I cry happy tears. I've incorporated this, and after I got home, and I think maybe this is like so this trip was such an amazing trip, and I will come back to that after I got home. In fact, maybe that deserves to be a part two. We'll see. Uh, Let me just zoom up a little bit. So of 192 possible hiking miles, I hiked 160 of them on my 2 feet in this body, right? Of 20 possible hiking days, I hiked 17. And I hiked the last 11 in a row, which like what? Um, and it was really interesting. The feeling that I've had is of being basically on Mount Olympus. I got on a plane and I was flown to Mount Olympus for 3 weeks, and I got to be completely present in all that time. I was so joyful. Everyone I met was amazing. Like there was a moment that I was on I got the opportunity to ride on a double decker domed top bus that transported people from where I was staying in Seatoller to all the way up to Keswick. It was just like the bus route happened to be this. And I was like, well, I'm not missing that. And on the way there, on the way to Keswick, it was just I was by myself up in the top of the dome, and I was just marveling at is a hobbit going to step out of this landscape right now was a lot of the feeling. It was so beautiful in the Lake District. And on the way back, these two guys got on the bus and they came up top, and there were bottles clinking, and they decided to move and sit right across from me at the front of the um, dome. And there's nobody else up there. And one of them pulled out a bottle, and it's booze. And I just thought, what are we doing here? Like, oh my gosh. I remember feeling a little bit unsafe. And with intuitively, what I did about that was I turned to them and engaged them in conversation. I just asked them like how they were. And they turned out to be two of the most amazing, beautiful people. One of them has a sister who lives in the town next door to me, which blew my mind. Like, you just never know. And so that was like, it changed how I interact this trip. I interacted completely differently. I was protected from a lot of things that that at home I would have had to engage with. Like one good example is driving, or even being on roads. Like I never got the hang of British roads. I nearly got hit a time or two trying to cross a British road because the traffic goes in the opposite direction. And I got the opportunity to visit with a dear, dear friend on the train down to and then in Oxford for the day. I'd always wanted to go to Oxford. I'd read so much about it. I've read and seen, so many of my favorite sort of dramas and things like that take place in Oxford. And um, I remember saying to my friend, I'm a toddler when it comes to roads. Like, I'm going to need your literal help to get across these roads. Like, I can't do this. And he was like, okay. So he would take my arm whenever we needed to cross the street in busy Oxford. And it was just so interesting because, like, so much of this trip was protected from things that I normally needed to take responsibility for, like driving is one example. I would just all I had to do and concern myself with was the self-care, the rest, the nutrition, and the joyful sort of getting up, getting out on the trail, and like getting to my next place. But I didn't think of it that way. I mostly thought of it as like, wow, I'm so lucky. I get to just, you know, be here now. Like it was just about the presence of it. And you know what I think I'm going to do? I think I'm going to allow this to be August's um, podcast episode for you. Like what I've brought you into the beginning of my learning, and this is we're calling this part one. I think there's more to say about what I learned about myself on the coast to coast path, and I think also I really want to do an episode on the integration of it all because boy, when I got home, that was really disorienting, like really, really disorienting, and it would be so interesting and fun to kind of share a little bit more another about what I actually learned while I was there, what the experience of that was like, and then one on the experience of integrating such profound change with you. And I think that's going to be like really fun. I'm excited to kind of bring you along in on that and have you along on that ride. I am going to wrap up with just to let you know that I have created a collection of events in Eventbrite. So, like celebrating that, first of all, that was some doing. I've been doing these conversations. I've had, I think, 3 or 4 now conversations about what I learned about myself while solo crossing England and on foot. And like the most recent one was I can pee anywhere, which on the surface sounds funny and fun, and it really was. But boy, did we go deep in that conversation. And I would really love if you're interested in being in a conversation about, for example, August is I can do hard things. I learned that. September is I know my truth. So a little bit more going deeper into what I was sharing just before. October is food is not my enemy. How did that come about? I'd really love to take you deeper into that and share my learning on that. In November, I'm doing the conversations will be about feelings over appearance because that turned out to be some really, really deep learning for me. And then in December, I'm doing I can get it all done because there was a time before I left that I didn't think I could, and then I discovered that I could. These are you can sign up for each of them now. You can see the dates and sign up for them. I know in August it's going to be the 28th and 29th of August. Um, and there's a bit.ly link just for that. So the August I can do hard things is oh nope, I don't have that one written down here and I can't I will put it in the show notes, but I don't have it right here. The collection where you can also see that one is bit.ly/ I learned collection, and that's all under like lowercase, no capitals in that. bit.ly/ I learned collection. The other thing I really, really wanted to share with you that I'm so excited to share is I have opened a virtual shop for my real art in real life art. It is klockkolp.com/art. And you can see all the things I've been creating. I just put up a category called Between the Worlds. That's where these archways are being shared. So you can look at the archway that I'm talking about right now if you want to. I'm so excited and so grateful for we have dear, dear friends who host my website and also developed this. Rich is the gentleman who developed this page for me. And, it's something special when the person, one of the people who babysat your 23-year-old when he was 4 months old is a person who can create such beautiful things for you as well in like the digital world. And I think that shot really shines through like the wonderful fun of my website is inspired, at least in part, by Ashdown Technologies, the folks who host me and who made this possible. So thank you very much to you guys. I have a final huge thanks to our producer, the man who has shown me, he's now taught me how to produce stuff. So I am celebrating him. He is not just our producer, but he is the 26-time winner of the Husband of the Year Award, Benjamin Kolp. I'm so grateful to you for being here, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye. They're all wave here. Bye-bye.